The story begins with a Japanese man sleeping inside a white room. As soon as he wakes up, he realizes that he is trapped in a strange place with no door, no windows, and not even a ceiling. Seeing this, he becomes extremely frightened. Gathering his courage, he walks toward the wall. There, he notices a strange object sticking out of the wall. He presses its upper part like a button. The moment he presses it, hundreds of baby angels emerge from the walls and floor of the room. They stare at him for a few seconds and then suddenly disappear. But before leaving, they create similar strange buttons all over the walls. The man starts crying and desperately calls for help. He screams as loudly as he can, but there is no one around to hear him. When he realizes there is no way out, he gives up and decides to press the other buttons. Whenever he presses a button, something suddenly falls from above. Sometimes it is a small toothbrush, while other times a huge flower vase crashes down. The man is slowly losing his mind because he has no idea what is going on. Eventually, he realizes that if he presses the same button repeatedly, he gets the same object every time. By repeatedly pressing one particular button, he manages to collect a huge pile of chopsticks. Then, he accidentally presses another button. Suddenly, a small car comes out of the wall and crashes directly into his legs. He screams in pain. Angrily, he presses another button. But this time, the button suddenly transforms into a strange body part and releases gas directly into his face. For several hours, he continues pressing different buttons, filling the entire room with mountains of useless objects. Then, in frustration, he throws a ball against the wall. The ball hits one of the buttons, and suddenly sushi begins falling from the air. He is extremely hungry, so he becomes happy when he sees the sushi. But then he realizes that there is no soy sauce to eat it with. He screams at his kidnappers, demanding some sauce. But as usual, there is nothing but silence. He desperately presses the remaining buttons, collecting huge amounts of sushi, but he still cannot find any soy sauce. Finally, he gives up and starts eating the sushi without sauce. Surprisingly, it tastes really good. Just as he finishes the last piece of sushi, he presses another button, and a bottle of soy sauce finally falls from above. Angrily, he throws the bottle away and presses another button. This time, he receives an old-fashioned pair of 3D glasses. As soon as he puts them on, he sees a tiny angel floating in the air. The angel is pointing toward a particular button on the wall. A spark appears in the man's eyes. He thinks he may have finally found a way out. However, the moment he presses that special button, a timer appears on the wall. Then, a huge mannequin suddenly drops from above and releases gas directly into his face. Several hours later, he starts reading comics to pass the time. He manages to read 5 books and is enjoying himself, but when he presses the button for the 6th book, he receives the 7th one instead. Annoyed, he presses other buttons. He gets the 8th and 9th books, but the 6th book is nowhere to be found. Finally, he tries one last button. This time, part of the wall opens, revealing a hidden door behind it. The man becomes incredibly excited. But in all the excitement, he forgets which button opened the door. He randomly presses another button, and suddenly an African man appears, running from one side of the room to the other. He presses a second button, and water falls directly onto his head. On the 3rd attempt, he finally finds the correct button. The wall opens, and he immediately runs toward the door. But before he can reach it, the door slams shut right in front of him. He tries again, but the same thing happens. Now he realizes that the door only remains open as long as the button stays pressed, so he places a very heavy flower vase on top of the button. But the stubborn button pushes itself back up even under the weight of the vase. The man realizes that he needs to make the vase even heavier. First, he presses the water button, but it is useless. No matter how many times he presses it, the water only falls directly on him. Then he tries filling the vase with sushi. But the vase becomes so heavy that he can no longer lift it. Its opening is also too small for him to put his hand inside, so he is forced to remove the sushi pieces one by one using chopsticks. After a long time, he removes enough sushi to make the vase light enough to lift. He somehow carries it back toward the button. But as soon as he reaches the wall, he forgets which button was the correct one again. He randomly presses a button, and the same African man comes out of the wall. He accidentally bumps into the vase, causing it to shatter into 2 pieces. The man starts screaming like crazy. And, in the middle of his anger, he finally finds the correct button. Now he begins piling sushi on top of the button to keep it pressed. But even the sushi trick fails. The stubborn button pushes itself back up through the pile of rice. Next, he tries sticking tape over the button. Then he attaches an iron plate to it with the tape. But nothing works. After repeatedly falling and getting injured, he is in terrible pain. So he takes some painkillers and goes to sleep for a while. When he wakes up, he wants to brush his teeth, so he tries pressing the water button. But once again, he accidentally presses the wrong button. This time, a rope drops from the ceiling. Seeing the rope instantly lifts his mood because he gets another brilliant idea. He thinks he can open the door and swing across the room using the rope, allowing him to reach the other side before the door closes. However, when he tries opening the hidden door, he discovers that it is locked. He barely manages to run back into the room before the door closes, but it slams hard against his back. Angrily, he kicks the wall. His kick accidentally presses a button, and suddenly a key appears floating in the middle of the room. But there is a problem. The moment the button pops back up, the key disappears. Now the man has two major challenges. He needs to keep the key inside the room while also keeping the door open. But first, he needs to find the key button again because, once again, he has forgotten where he kicked the wall. He randomly presses a button. Instead of the key, a dog comes out of the wall and starts barking at him. He tries again, and the same dog appears. On his third attempt, he finally finds the key button. This time, he doesn't want to take any chances. While pointing toward the button with his finger, he slowly walks backward and uses a piece of sushi to mark the button. But the moment he presses it, the same dog appears again. After a lot of effort, he finally finds the correct button once more. Now he comes up with another brilliant plan. He grabs the rope hanging from the ceiling and tries to swing through the air toward different buttons. But once again, things don't go as planned. When he falls onto the floor, he notices a plunger. Suddenly, he gets an idea. He realizes that he can use the plunger to push against the wall and launch himself farther. After failing once, his master plan finally works. He swings from the rope, pushes against the wall with the plunger, and quickly reaches the key button. He grabs the key before it disappears. Immediately afterward, he presses the door button and manages to get through the door before it closes. Without wasting any time, he puts the key into the lock and turns it. But then he discovers another lock above the door. This lock requires a 3-digit password. The man grabs his head in frustration. Just as he tries to escape, the door slams into his back again. Completely furious, he throws the plunger at the opposite wall. It accidentally hits the button that produces the African man, and the man appears once again. As the African man runs past him, he notices 3 numbers written on the man's forehead. He immediately realizes that these must be the numbers needed for the password. Once again, he swings from the rope, pushes himself off the wall with the plunger, and enters the 3 numbers into the lock one by one. The lock finally opens. However, the door is slightly jammed. Using all his strength, he manages to force it open. But suddenly, the section of the wall behind him closes. Now he is trapped inside an extremely narrow space with barely enough room to move. He cannot even open the door completely. Completely broken, the man sits down on the floor and bursts into tears. He starts remembering all the things he received from the buttons. He realizes that although he was trapped in that room, at least he had plenty of space to move around and lots of things to keep himself entertained. He regrets not appreciating what he had. Suddenly, he feels cold air coming from the wall on his left. When he touches it, he notices a crack. This reveals that the wall is also fake. Without wasting any time, he pushes the panel open and runs outside. He finds himself in a mysterious corridor floating in complete darkness. He runs desperately, trying to find a way out. It feels as though he has been running for centuries. When he finally reaches another room, his appearance has completely changed. Even the color of his bright pajamas has completely faded. The new room is also completely empty. As soon as he steps inside, the door behind him automatically closes. But this time, large angels, not tiny ones, emerge from the walls. They simply stare at him before disappearing in an instant. And just like before, they leave the same strange buttons behind on the walls. He presses one button, but nothing happens. Angrily, he starts trying the other buttons. Now, strange events begin happening all over the world. When he presses one button, a singer performing at a concert in Los Angeles suddenly starts shooting fire from his mouth. When he presses another button, a famous magician in Russia completely fails while performing his magic trick. Then, when he presses a third button, a man in China starts barking crazily at his own dogs in the middle of the street. The man is completely broken and is about to give up, but then he notices a bright light coming from above. He realizes that, just like the previous room, this room also has no ceiling. He looks up and sees the same angels flying high in the sky. Now, instead of pressing the buttons, he grabs them and begins climbing up the wall. As he climbs higher and higher, incredible miracles begin happening on Earth. Flowers suddenly bloom in some places, while in another place, an elephant suddenly dies. The higher he climbs, the greater the effect of touching the buttons becomes. Now, he is no longer affecting just nature, he is directly affecting people's lives as well. Sometimes a toaster inside someone's house suddenly turns on by itself. At other times, a human being suddenly steps onto the moon. By the time he reaches the very top of the wall, his hair and beard have grown extremely long. Now he doesn't even need to hold onto the wall anymore because he has become capable of floating in the air just like the angels. As he continues rising, white feathers begin flying all around him, carrying him through the air toward the final room of this strange game. This room is completely different from all the previous rooms. Its walls are covered with a map of the entire Earth, and in the center stands one enormous button. Perhaps this is the button capable of changing the fate of the entire world. The man slowly walks toward the button. And just as his hand touches it, the screen suddenly goes completely black. And that's where the story ends. How did you like the video? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.